Cool. Hello, my name is Daniel Johnson, and today I am going to be talking about this game, Wario Land 4. Now I'm going to be taking this game and breaking apart its first level, and I'm breaking apart from a game design perspective, explaining how the level was made and how it works and what it does. Okay. Now, the reason why I am doing this is because I've written a book about this game. The book is called Rethinking Games Criticism and Analysis of Wario Land 4. Now, in this book, I take this entire game and I break it down. I start from the base and I build up from there. I do it, with a formalist approach. So I use clear language. I use evidence. There's no waffly. This is what I feel. My feelings. My feelings. My feelings. There's none of that nonsense. It's just me talking about this game and breaking it down. And yeah, so I've done this book. It's coming out. It should be coming out in the second half of this year. Please stay tuned. This is a video thing that I'm just throwing together. I haven't done any preparation for it. I'm just going. I'm just freewheeling it here. So let's get into this. And if you do enjoy this, please check out my site and all the links that you can find. Okay, so the first level is called the Hall of Hieroglyphs. The game is set in a pyramid. Okay, Wario enters through the vortex. It's quite amusing here, and then he enters here. Okay, so this is the first room of the game. I break the levels in this game down by rooms. Rooms have transitions between them, so it's very clear what is a room, what isn't. Wario falls from the vortex. He falls because to alert the player that gravity is in effect. That's really important. Um, Now, what we see here is we see Wario, the vortex. We see this frog switch. Now just pay attention to the vortex and the frog switch here. See how the vortex is closing and actually they're both closing at the same time. This denotes a form of relationship between them. Also note the sign here and the fact that the player cannot get into this area. As soon as the player enters the level, they can see straight away where they need to go, or at least it's suggested by the things I just mentioned. Um, Now, the reason now it's really important here that all of this information is displayed on screen and the player can't jump around and move the camera. So so for this room um, the camera is fitting within a bounding box, a screen-sized bounding box. Okay, now that's all that kind of camera stuff done. Now onto the gameplay. So here we have some platforms. Wario must jump up these platforms in order to ascend them. Notice how they are of the same height. So every time the player jumps up, they need to make the same. They need to hold the jump button for the same amount of time. Okay. Now I should be clear. This is also a room. There's just a bit of a. It just there's a transition from the bounding box. Okay. So that notice here that the gap between the platforms is a bit smaller than the previous ones. This is there to alert the player that they can change the height of Wario's jump by by holding the jump button down longer or shorter. Cool. So it just draws their attention to this. We also see these frog block outlines, which are a form of curiosity marker, which is the same as the sign just downstairs. Okay. Sorry, I should be clear. A fade to black is is a room transition. Okay, any camera movement occurs within the room. Okay, so we have clear sign here. These signs are used throughout the level um, so as to instruct the player very clearly of what they're meant to be doing. Now, the interesting part about this room is that there's two pipes, and what the player might be thinking right now is that Wario will go into the first pipe and come out the second. What happens though? Let's have a look. Wario goes in, and he goes into another room. Okay, and so just by by segmenting this out across two rooms, it is communicated to the player that the pipes are straight. It's not like in Super Mario Brothers where the pipes are curved, whereas they could say in some other game the pipe could curve around and send Wario through to the other side of the previous room. No, no. In this case, they're just straight, and this is true of all of the pipes in this game. So that's communicated very clearly. Now, in this section, these two pipes act as stalagmites. Stalagmites are those pointy spires, these upside down spires inside caves. Um, yeah, so they're pointing down, and so they restrict the player's area of movement, and they confine it down to this section here. Now, what we see here is these merrymen. They move across and they create contrary motion. Okay, they move in the opposite direction to the player, and they limit the player to this space. Everything's fixed into this space. The player doesn't have a lot of movement options here. They are organically controlled to interact with these merrymen in some way by confining space, and also through the use of these lovely crystals, which are rewards. Okay, and so the player's getting so on the players picking up these crystals and they're getting the rewards. It feels great, but they're being led into the merriment. Now there are two things that the player could do here. The first one is that they bump into the merriment, which I guess is likely because they haven't been taught how to attack yet. But at the same time, the player might just play around and find out how to attack and teach themselves the attack mechanic. Either way, the player is taught that they can attack these mechanics, that they can attack these enemies and defeat them, and that they also drop spoils, or they can be taught that they are harmless enemies that they can bump into. Okay, they don't have any obvious weak point, form fits function. So the enemies around circular, they don't have any spikes or anything like that. So it's pretty clear that they can't hurt the player. Good. Okay, and so we're on to the other side now. Cool. Okay, so we're into this room. Pay attention to the layout of this room. I'll be referring to it a little later. This could be seen. Yeah. Just pay attention to it now. Okay. Now we have this jewel piece chest. Inside is a jewel piece. It's very intuitive. The player just needs to walk up. To it, touch it, and it will open. Very easy. Okay. They defeat the merriment. Okay, now what we have here is the introduction of the attack mechanic, which we've seen, our friend use quite a lot already. So the attack mechanic can be used to break this block here, this regular block. Now, there's a few things going on here. The first one is that, as you'll notice, the camera is held within a tall screen-wide bounding box. So no matter what the player does, they cannot change the camera. And the only way the player can get through this section is by breaking this block. Okay, so the player will go ahead and do that. And now, actually, there's also another bounding box that covers these two units. The game is broken up into units, and this bounding box here leads into the subsequent area, but most players will move too quickly to really notice it. But it's a subtle way that the camera is controlled. Okay, so here we have a bit of variation on our original tutorial. So the attack mechanic is now combined with attack and jump. Very simple. Okay, and the player once again is forced to defeat this block. Maybe defeat's the wrong word, but okay. Now, this area here, this room is what I call restricted practice, and it's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, the player is restricted in what they can do, and the only way they can get through is to prove that they know how to use the mechanic. So the player, and this is really important because some games just throw the player in without checking if they can do stuff. In this game, the only way the player can get through this level is by demonstrating their knowledge and application of the game mechanics. Now, did you pay attention to the previous room like this, the previous jewel piece chest room? Because what you see here is you see this block. See, the crystals are the same, the jewel piece chest is the same, the room is the same, but this little block is here. And so it's a point of difference, right? So when the player enters this room, they're going to notice this point of difference because that's just how we think. You know, people look for patterns, and when there's inconsistency in a pattern, they notice it. And so the player's attention on entering this area is focused on this block. Okay. Now we just had the restricted practice where the player was taught this. So what we have here is we have freer practice, where the player can freely apply what they've learned. And through this point of difference with the block, the player is coerced into breaking this block. So it's very subtle teaching that's going on here, right? With and the whole and I won't go through this anymore, but the rest of the level is broken up into pockets of restricted and freer practice. Okay, the player is taught something, the player can apply something in their own way. This is very important. Anyone who's a teacher out there will know this: is that you need to restrict the player's um, the play environment so that the player can learn something, and then you allow them to freely apply it so as to take ownership of the education. It's really important. Okay, this is okay. I need some water. Give me a sec. Ah, good water. Okay, so what we have here is we have the dash attack. This could be seen as variation of the attack tutorial, and it's very similar, except this area is thicker and we have two blocks. Okay, few things to mention here. There is a regular block and a thick block, and the regular block is put in front of the thick block. The reason for this is that there are two reasons based on how the player might react. The first is that if the player chooses to attack the regular block and then attack the thick block, they will learn that they cannot break the thick block through an attack. Now, the second reason that is that the player could also dash attack through both blocks. And this would inform the player that the dash attack not only breaks thick blocks, but it also breaks regular blocks. Also note here, underneath Wario is a red arrow. This informs the player of the run up that's required to charge this mechanic. See how it took a little bit of time for Wario to charge that dash attack. Okay. Now we have a similar thing going on here, but this time we have hold up, this time we have it combined with jump, which is just like before. Notice how we have two arrows here. This not only visually represents the distance that the player the distance that Wario must run in order to charge the mechanic, but it also tells the player where they should jump from. Okay. Now, the reason why the pool of water is there is so that, let's have a look. Wario breaks on the block, he's knocked back, and he falls into the water. So the water is used to make the knockback apparent, which our friend has just demonstrated for us again. Yeah, so just through these two rooms, the player is taught how to do the dash attack, how to dash attack jump, the length of the dash attack, that the dash attack can break thick and regular blocks, and that there is a knockback to this. In two arrangements, it teaches that. Genius, isn't it? Absolutely genius. Okay, so this room is kind of restricted, and it really just focuses on teaching the player that they can jump into blocks in order to break them, which extends off of the attack and dash attack mechanic tutorials. Okay, we also have a diamond behind here. It's kind of like a like a hidden reward. The other thing to note is that this corridor is filled with regular blocks, so maybe up to about this point here. So the player can't start dash attacking their way through, like from the onset. They need to actually break some regular blocks first. Now, once the player breaks one regular block, they're probably going to want to break another regular block because they did it just before, and there's a context that was set because they just did it, and it's easy just to push the button and do it again. And so there's a good chance that the player will break all of these blocks here manually. Now, what this does in combination with this thick block here is that it informs the player of that run-up time by getting the player to clear the running path. It informs the player that there is a running path and that there is a distance in which they must charge the mechanic. Again, Very subtle, very awesome. Okay, now cool stuff is going on here too. So this section teaches the throw slash charge throw. Okay, um, primarily just primarily charge. Okay, because the player can't actually break these blocks with a regular throw. So what's interesting to note here is that there is a raised section that's 2 units up. Now the reason this is here is so that when Wario throws this, and the block moves through and breaks, and the rock moves through and breaks these two blocks, that actually, by moving along the floor, there's no resistance. Like, as we see here, see, like, the rock just moved right through. The floor didn't create drag. By the same account, there's a gap here, so that the player knows that the ceiling doesn't create drag, and that the ceiling and the floor, and that when a rock moves through the ceiling and the floor, there is no drag created at all. Okay. The other reason is for this gap here, is that just so that the player doesn't screw around, like jump up here, try and break the block. That's only like deconstructive, like it's just time wasting. So they remove that. Okay. Now, this section is really interesting because we just have this little arrow and it does all the teaching for the player. Also note, here we have a regular block. It is hidden in the terrain here. This is a way the player can scale the difficulty and do a little bit of exploration. So the ladder teaches the player everything that they need to know about climbing. Oh, they threw it. Okay. Okay, I'm going to have to cover this section now. So so first the player learned how to throw horizontally. Now they're learning how to throw vertically. Um, Now, what's interesting here is that we just have one block and it's 2 units wide. Okay. Now, because it's surrounded by a ceiling, to some extent, it forces the player to throw within that range. Like the player can't just throw over here and break a block, or throw over to the left or to the right of it. They must actually hit that target. There's a target to hit. Okay, that's created by this ceiling area. Now, that's really important because the upward charge throw, it's not a straight up chart. It's not a straight up throw. It doesn't just go up, directly up. It's actually curved. It's a curved forward trajectory, and it's curved in the direction that Wario is facing. And so, by having a target, the player is implicitly taught this little tiny little detail. Okay, and there's another way in which they're taught. Have you figured it out yet? Yeah, very simple. This here in the diagram, it's the trajectory is exaggerated. Okay, so the player breaks that and blocks up there. Okay, and then our friend goes back and he gets the reward. Now the reason for this enemy, the spearman, is because, well, here the player gets the heart medallion, which heals all their health, right? And so if they don't actually have, because the merriman, they don't take any health off, and there's no threats so far. Like there's no hard threats, so they needed. So a hard threat was needed here, so as to make the player lose some health, to um, and therefore to demonstrate the purpose of the heart medallion. I mean, let's take a theoretical example. What if the player were to enter this area and have full hearts, and also a full bar here, and they pick up the heart medallion, and they think, well, this doesn't do anything, and maybe some players will encounter that, right? So by having the spearman there, there's a chance that the player will lose health and therefore learn of the purpose of the heart medallion. Okay. Now this is very subtle here, right? Player like there's no tutorial needed here at all. Um, the player just needs to walk into the unit high passage in order to have Wario move through it. It's just that simple. There's no need to teach anything. It's just great. Bounding box. Camera scrolls into the next bounding box. Okay. Um, Now this section is interesting for one point, and that is this. Wario throws. Oh, where did that rock go? Oh, I don't know where it went. Does anyone know? Okay. Someone, the player threw the rock off screen. So let's have a look. What happens? Is it on the other side? Oh, it's not. There's no rock here. By the previous arrangement is there to teach the player that they can throw a rock through uh, through through a screen transition from one room to the other, and it will disappear in that transition. Okay, there is more on this in a second. Um, let's see. Oh, what's the variation? What is the variation in this room? You've been paying attention, haven't you? Yeah, it's this one. Spearmint. Okay, the spearmint is now introduced. Player jumps. Player breaks. Player breaks block. Okay, another simple tutorial. Okay. Um, Everything is explained very clearly. I don't think there is anything else to add. Now, because this player has finished this level already, the Keyser, which is a ghost with a key nose, and it's used to open up the subsequent area, the subsequent level. That's not here, but if it were here, it would float about here, and we've got key. So both through the form of the Keyser and also through this little sign, the player knows it's a key. Okay, now, aha! Continuing on from the rock thing that I mentioned before, where the player threw the rock and it disappeared between rooms. Have a look what happens here. Wario rolls between rooms, but his roll state carries between rooms. Now the reason he rolls between rooms and he also must throw a rock between rooms is to teach the player about the suspension between rooms. I mean, so Wario's state remains the same from one room to another, but his um, but any game elements that move from one room to the other disappear. And there's good reason for this as well, which, yeah. And this block is here to obviously stop the player from rolling through this room. What's the variation? Have you found it yet? Yes, it's a diamond. This is, now, the reason why the diamond is placed here, pardon me, the reason why the diamond is placed here on top of the jewel piece box, or jewel piece chest, is because if the player, as we'll see in a second, if the player opens the jewel piece chest, then it will disappear, thereby removing their platform. So this is a tiny little sequence puzzle, okay? Also notice, I think the spearman there is a red spearman, the other one wasn't. I'm not sure if he did a quake just then, but that could also be some form of variation too. Okay. Okay, cool. So, smash attack time or butt stomp. In my book, I call it smash attack because that's just what it's called in the instruction manual. But yeah, butt stomp is what this is also known as by fans. Um, Thing here is this little part here. Why is this here? I mean, the player doesn't actually need to stand on top of this. You know, they can just do what the player here is doing and break the block directly. So why is this even needed? Why not just have a big wall here? Well, and the reason is really simple. When the player jumps here and then smash attacks from here, they are following the Mr. Game and Watch character, right? And the reason why the developers want the player to go up here, jump, and smash attack here is because it makes a clearer, it's a longer attack, and it accentuates the vertical nature a bit more clearly. It communicates a bit more strongly. Okay. Now, nothing here should be new. It's just a combination of stuff that we know before, but again, some variation over the previous secret we had. In the corner here, we have this block, which is breakable terrain. The player can break this to get to a reward on the other side. This builds off of the previous arrangement where there was a regular block in a wall. Okay. And so breakable terrain is subtly taught. Everything else here you should know about. Okay. This is the first fall from one room to another that the player does in the game. So the player knows that they can move from one room to another through pipes, both horizontally and vertically. The player falls. They don't need to smash attack. Oh, and sorry, I didn't mention before. It was a heightened smash attack. and that the yeah, I mean it's very self-explanatory. I think you should be able to figure that one out. It's pretty cool. Okay, so warrior breaks the blocks. Now the reason why the rock is on the left is so that the player gets over to the right. They flick the frog switch, and then they're like, "Oh God, what do I do now?" And and they need to think. They need to problem solve for, under pressure. And so yes, so they need to problem solve this one, right? Now, and also instigates a little bit of panic, right? Because the player sees this and think, oh, okay, I got to get through here, and then like, well, what do I do? What do I do? And so this also helps to characterize the nature of the post-fold. This game is full of folded level design. I talk about it a lot in the book. Um, this helps to accentuate the post-fold stress, like just how stressful these post-fold areas are under the timer. But our player knows this, and he's carried the block over, and he drops it. Yep. And okay, so here we see on screen, we can see the relationship uh, between the block outlines, the frog block outlines, and the frog switch. By activating it, these open up. Do you remember the frog block outlines just at the top of the room, leading to the next uh, in the passageway? Okay. Now the reason they are there is to prevent the player from avoiding Mr. Vortex and going to the next room and getting lost and screwing themselves over. Okay. And also because these are on screen at the same time, the player can see the relationship between them. Oh, and the exit here, the text and the sign, they have popped up, and yes, so they indicate uh, where the player is meant to go, and it's also the curiosity here is coming full circle. So, yep. So the player goes through, they go back. Notice how the screen is changing. How the colors are changing. That's done so as to inform the player of the different states. The player jumps through. Okay. One final point to note is here. This is 2 units higher. Okay. So yeah. So the player can't. Let me think. Yeah. Wario can't crouch jump his way back in here. So because he can't get back through here, because this area at the top is blocked off, the only way the player can go is through this vortex. Now, this is really important because the designers don't want the player to get to this point and then screw it up. Like, imagine you just bought this cool game and you're playing it and you get through this first level and you're like, yeah, this is easy, easy, easy. And then you get to the end and then you miss and you don't know where you're meant to be going and the timer counts down as game over. That's a real roadblock. So that's why this game is. That's why this level in particular has so many little details that I've pointed out because it's really important that the player understands how to play the game. Now, it's also worth mentioning that this level it doesn't cover all the mechanics. It covers the key core mechanics to the game. The next passage or at least on the next passage I cover in the book, the Emerald Passage. I believe it's the Emerald Passage, the nature one that covers more tutorial swimming and a whole bunch of other skills that are really important. Okay, and so Wario goes through the vortex, and it does this cool effect, and he's oh cool. So we're finished. Okay. So, and I can't find. Okay, that's disappeared. Okay, well, I just want to say, guys, thank you for watching. Yeah, I know some of you have been waiting for this book for quite a while. It will be coming out in the second half of this year. Please look forward to it. And as I said before, I did this very quickly and I didn't think through it, so it's a bit rough. But if you like it, please leave a comment either on YouTube or the site. Let me know what you think. And yeah, have a good one, okay? Peace. Take care.